days after Bernie Sanders visited Colorado, he, along with 4 other Democratic presidential candidates, took to the debate stage Tuesday night. In the CNN-hosted event, many saw Hillary Clinton as the contender, with issues of income equality, climate change, and gun control being discussed. David, what are your major takeaways?
This was the Clinton bots' 26th presidential debate. For everybody else on stage, it was their first. It clearly showed. The software upgrade was outstanding, and boy, you know, the animatronic presidents have come so far since President Lincoln walked on that stage at Disneyland so long ago. Her performance was excellent. Her supporters and even some of it seems much of the Democratic Party doesn't care that she was transparently lying about so many things, including purporting that her flip-flop on the Pacific trade deal was what she'd actually been thinking all along. In my own view, and there's some in the media have agreed with this as well, the candidate who gained the most other than her was Jim Webb, because you had three candidates who were essentially unknown to the general public, and certainly former Governor O'Malley, for people who are ultras on anti-gun, and that's their big issue. He did a good job of attracting them. Lincoln Chafee, a very honest man, who's my second choice for the nomination, but didn't have a very strong performance in the debate. But Jim Webb spoke to people who believe in the party of John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman, of strong national defense, of a party that stands up against cronyism, which Mrs. Clinton embodies, and really fights for working men and working women, and who is against Marxism and recognizes it as an evil doctrine rather than something that ought to be imposed as some kind of Marxism light. So I hope more people come out of this voting for either the guy who's right on the issues, which is Jim Webb, or the guy who was honest and scandal-free, which is Lincoln Chafee.
All right, Eric, some might consider Ben Sanders to be like the people's champ. I know we haven't really talked about him just yet. What do you think?
Well, I guess I have to start by thinking, I hate to break it to David, but I think you're going to be sadly disappointed in the outcome here.
I'm just somewhat afraid of that.
Lincoln Chafee, the block of granite that he described himself as, is probably not going to be the nominee. I share some of the sentiment about Jim Webb. I think he's a very admirable person, but he's a person without a party in this polarized climate. He would have been an attractive Democratic candidate 30 years ago, but this party has moved way left of him. Hillary Clinton had a very good night, and she did everything she needed to do, probably plus a little. But let's not forget that this was not a debate among the A-team. Hillary Clinton was the only A-team person there. Otherwise, it was the B team, or in baseball terms, you know, double-A ball at best. I'm not even sure this was a triple-A ball in most cases. It stands apart from the Republican debates where you have a number of plausible presidents on the stage. Hillary Clinton won because, as viewers tuned in, even if your sound was down, she was the only plausible president on that stage. Bernie Sanders does a great job of being Bernie Sanders. But I think his ultimate impact in this race is a potentially problematic one for Democrats, which is this is a party that is already moving pretty significantly to the left, and Bernie Sanders is exerting a strong gravitational pull, pulling it even further to the left. I think the other loser on Tuesday night, Wednesday night, whatever night it was probably Joe Biden, and that if he is seriously thinking about entering this race, or if he was seriously thinking, he needed to be on that stage to present one other plausible president standing up there in addition to Hillary Clinton. And for all of those doubting people in the party who were getting ready to hit the panic button, Clinton did more than enough to reassure them, and I think that it complicates the Biden calculation of what he wants to do.
Ben, what were some of your takeaways from the debate?
Well, it's fascinating watching the pundit class talk about it. And, you know, having watched it, my takeaway was that Bernie Sanders crushed the competition in that debate. And I appreciate that Hillary has greater name ID and a bigger history, and there are more eyes on her in some ways. But I think that that's largely the people that have already formed opinions. And I think if you go out into the real world where people don't really care about this every day, and you get feedback on what they heard and what they felt, and you can look at every single network, every single one that did surveys after the debate, Bernie cleaned up in every single one. So, you know, to me, what I saw was a sort of a first sort of announcement of here I am to the American public. We already know Hillary. We already know all of her baggage. We know all this stuff. And in an age where, you know, subtlety is dead, we have a guy who hasn't been subtle for 30 years continuing to do what he's going to do. And I think it's much more resonant than anybody on national television wants to talk about, because frankly, he represents, at least rhetorically, a real change from the status quo. And he's the only one up there saying things that a lot of people are feeling in this country. People are feeling the income inequality. They're feeling their college debt. They're feeling all this stuff. Nobody is feeling Hillary's emails. Nobody cares. And that, you know, moment where Bernie said, nobody cares about this, I thought was right on the money. And to me, all this talk about Hillary, blah, 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 is just that. It's blah, blah, blah. Anybody watching with fresh eyes heard something different and new. And that's why Bernie Sanders has more donors online than any candidate in history, has more traction than Barack Obama had at this stage in 2008. And I think that, you know, what you see is essentially the pundit class and the media trying to hang on to the status quo and dismiss what he did as much as possible. And I think it's a mistake that will come back to play when he's maybe the nominee. And I appreciate that he's a socialist or whatever, but I don't think Americans really care that much. The idea of American what's the word? Where Americans think that we're the greatest. That notion is dead. It's no longer the majority view in this country. So and I think what's more and more the majority view is that something needs to change, and he's the only one up there saying it. So I thought it was pretty clear.
All righty, Patty, I'll let you wrap this up for us.
Well, I think 8 years ago, we also heard that things needed to change, and we've seen a lot of disappointment in the person we voted for, that many of us voted for. I don't know about everyone else at this table. You probably weren't too young.
I was not.
I caucused for him.
All right, you caucused for him. I have to disagree with you as a minor league pundit. I care about Hillary Clinton's emails because I care about the fact that the story has shifted so many times, that it showed such.
Person, no.
Well, no, but I'm just saying they will start caring at certain points, and it does